Dubbed Our Lady of the Ladle in 1966 by Time magazine, Julia Child was a cultural phenomenon who introduced America to French cooking.
Julia was the face of cooking. It was the first time seeing a woman out of a home kitchen as a professional, being strong and powerful and playful.
Julia really changed cooking in the United States because she took it from being drudgery to being a joy, the joy that it should be.
Julia Carolyn Mcwilliams was born on August 15, 1912, in Pasadena, California.
Her mother had a cook, as did all their friends and neighbors. So there was no interest in cooking. There was interest in eating. And Julia, who grew to be 6 feet 2 inches tall, was always ravenous.
I was always tremendously hungry. My theory was that the more you ate at every meal, the better off you were.
During World War II, Julia was stationed in Asia, where she met Paul Child in 1945.
That's also when she fell in love with food, Chinese food. They would go to restaurants and they talked about food as they were eating it, and that was very different for her.
A year later, they were married.
She realized that the man she'd fallen in love with, Paul Child, was one of those people who adored food.
After World War II, Julia moved to Paris, when her husband was assigned to work in the American embassy there.
Julia was looking for a career, and it was suggested because she was so passionate about learning to be a good cook for Paul's sake that she should go to the Cordon Bleu.
I think when Julie first attended the Cordon Bleu, she did create a revolution. Not only was she a woman, she was an American woman, and she was bound and determined to prove that she could do this, and she did.
While living in Paris, Julie got the idea of writing a cookbook and teaching cooking in her own apartment from 2 women who were doing that. She started working with them on their book, and the 3 of them would alternate classes for American women in their respective apartments.
After many years of collaborative work, the 2-volume, 734-page cookbook was published in 1961.
Mastering the Art of French Cooking was groundbreaking because it was one of the first books to present everything in a step-by-step approach, which made it easy for people to follow and learn.
Julia got her start on TV at the public television station in Boston when she was on as a guest promoting her cookbook. They got so much of a response that they asked her to come back and do a cooking show.
The French Chef was the first nationwide cooking show. Julia Child's attitude was great for amateur cooks. The way she was carefree, and if you make a mistake, it's okay, just keep going, move on.
Julia's presence on TV is what really made her the face of cooking in America. There was no one like her back then, and honestly, I don't believe there's anyone like her today still.
In 1993, Julia Child became the first woman inducted into the Culinary Institute Hall of Fame. In 2000, the Smithsonian National Museum of American History moved her kitchen and made it part of their permanent exhibit.
One of Julia's greatest gifts was she helped to spark an outcry for better ingredients.
We talk about locavores today, we talk about sustainable and organic, and all of these are the names that are given to what I think Julia started.
I think Julia brought to America about changing the way we thought about cooking. It wasn't a job that just had to be done quickly in the kitchen. It was really about having a great time, being in there with friends, with family, and enjoying the process.
In 2004, Julia Child died.
There's no question in my mind. She changed the face of cooking in this country.
Okay, now what?
We do hollandaise now?
Hollandaise, good.
Classic hollandaise. All right, I have a couple of egg yolk here, and I'm going to put a little bit of water in there and a little bit of lemon juice.
A tablespoon each of lemon juice?
Yes, well, about a tablespoon altogether. And what you want to do, you want your egg yolk to be cooked enough. Often people are so afraid of cooking those egg yolks that actually they are not cooked enough, you know. But of course, you want to be careful not to do scrambled eggs. So, you know, sometimes you move them out, you move them back in when you feel that it's going a bit too fast.
You have to cook it enough so it'll thicken.
As you can see, now it's starting cooking. I start seeing in between the strike of the whisk,
yes, you
start seeing the bottom, you know.
This definitely is thick, too, isn't it?
Yep. So I'm removing it there. I think that this is cooked enough.
Looks that way.
That part of the hollandaise we call the sabayon. And sometimes we use that to add to a fish sauce and all that. So here should be really kind of off the heat to start putting your butter.
And that's so terribly important, just little droplets at first. Because if you put in too much,
It's good. And if you start getting too thick, as mine is getting thick here, put a little bit of warm water.
And that's really taken, hasn't it?
Yeah. You want to put a little bit of salt in there? Give me a dash of salt. And I like a little dash of cayenne.
Oh, okay. That gives it a prettier color.
Yeah. Whoop, that's good. Beautiful. Okay, so we can finish our eggs now.
We'll start with the eggs Benedict.
Okay,
And I think that's usually done on an English muffin, but I think the English muffin is a little bit tough to cut. I'd much rather have a nice brioche bread and cut a circle out of it.
All right, I'm putting the eggs to rewarm there. You know, another thing that we have, which is very classic here, to show you, I have some truffle here.
Oh,
And,
nothing wrong with them.
Look at that.
Look
Beautiful
at that.
black tuberum, melanosporum, the black truffle of Périgord. So we put a couple of slices. This is a truffle slicer. This is extravagance.
Yeah,
If you don't have it,
well,
it's
why
fine.
not, as long as you have it?
Yes, as long as. And we just warm up the truffle with a little bit of butter for a minute or so. That's about fine. And they get darker like this, and they get a bit soft.
That's
which they should
lovely.
be. So I leave them here.
Oh, wait, no, what do we do?
Now we're practically ready.
There, here's your piece of toast. And then we put a little ham on it. This is a kind of a prosciutto ham, which I think is nice. Put in one of your eggs right there.
I don't know whether it's yours or mine, but beautiful. So a bit of the hollandaise sauce. And of course, this is very delicious. We put our pieces of truffle on top.
Which you don't have to do, but it's nice if someone's
maybe
given
I'll
you
put two
some.
as long as it's there.
That's lovely.
Beautiful, yes. Okay, this is the classic egg Benedict, right? See here, if you break it, you can see the inside of the yolk. It's just about the
That
right way,
looks
right?
just lovely, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
You don't have any of the toast with it. I think one forgets
I haven't eaten
how
it.
good hollandaise
Yes,
is.
I was just going to say that. I haven't eaten that hollandaise in quite a while. You don't do that all the time, but when you do it and do
Oh,
it
it's
properly, it
delicious.
is good.
Delicious.
Finally tonight, the continuing influence of Julia Child on cooking and American tastes. Today would have been the famous French chef's 100th birthday. The tributes have already begun for one of the original pioneers in the PBS family. We have our own look, and Jeffrey Brown is our guide.
The Chicken Sisters! Miss Broiler! Miss Fryer!
A little confidence, Julia Child taught several generations of Americans, is all you need to cook French cuisine. Oh, and a lot of butter.
Yes, if you do that, then the butter won't burn.
In fact, it wasn't until her 30s that Child even began cooking seriously. She was born in Pasadena in 1912, and during World War II worked for the OSS, the precursor to the CIA. Then in 1949, while her husband was stationed in Paris as a Foreign Service officer, she enrolled at the famed Cordon Bleu School of Cooking. In 1961, she published the first of 18 books and the one that made her a national name. Mastering the art of French cooking not only launched Child as an author, it led to her first TV show, which debuted nationally on public television in 1963.
Welcome to the French Chef. I'm Julia Child.
In short order, she became a smash hit. There was no one else quite like her.
You just have to have the courage of your convictions, particularly if it's sort of a loose mass like this. Well, that didn't go very well. But you can always pick it up, and if you're alone in the kitchen, who is going to see? Welcome.
She was famous enough to be parodied on Saturday Night Live.
Today we're going to make a holiday feast, or les fêtes d'Holiday. Julia
And after Child's death in 2004, Meryl Streep introduced her to a younger generation in the film Julie and Julia.
You should have seen the way those men looked at me. But then they discovered I was fearless.
Now, marking Child's 100th birthday, PBS Digital Studios has released a musical remix of her years on the air.
You can't define these in a recipe. You can only know
Today, the National Museum of American History celebrated Julia Child, unveiling a new showing of her TV kitchen. And some thoughts on Julia Child's impact all these years later. It comes from her great-nephew, Alex Prudhomme. He co-wrote with Child the book My Life in France, which, among other things, documents her early years, her passion for French cooking, and her struggle early on to get published. Alex, welcome.
Thanks.
I wanted to start with those years in France, because that you and she wrote about, because that's really where she discovered herself, right?
It's true. Before Paul took her to France in 1948, Julia hadn't traveled much at all. She'd been to Mexico, and although she had studied French her whole academic career, she said to me that she could never really speak French until she arrived on November 3rd, 1948. Paul was in the diplomatic service. He brought her over to France, and they stepped off the boat and drove to Paris. And along the way, they stopped in Rouen, the famous medieval town, and they had lunch. And her first French meal was a sole meunière, and she described it to me as an opening of the soul. It's where she really discovered her true passion, and it was the meal that changed her life and arguably American cooking.
Now, you knew her. I mean, this exuberance we see, the style, the way of talking, of describing things, that was her, for real?
Well, the Julia you saw on television was the real Julia that I knew as a flesh and blood person. I think on television it gets amped up a little bit. You know, she could sometimes get wild and crazy with her blowtorches and her giant knives and having fun with umbrellas on TV. She wasn't like that at home, but she was really fun, really smart, inquisitive, somewhat mischievous, and a very hard worker. And so the Julia, the essence of the Julia that you saw on television was the real Julia.
I don't know if you want to call it a philosophy, but this cooking as a social endeavor, cooking as something you talk to people about on the television and that you sort of do for people.
Yeah.
That was real.
That was real. I mean, Julia was a great communicator. She was a natural at this new medium at the time, television. And, you know, she had spent years working in obscurity, very hard on preparing her technique and learning about food. And then when it came time for her to go on television and talk about it to the American public, she made it look easy. And one of the things that she always said was, you know, it really is easy. You know, don't get disturbed by these long recipes. It's quite easy. And people followed her tune. And in fact, were really inspired by her to try things that they never would have otherwise.
And when she became such a celebrity, she clearly was aware of it. Did it change anything?
Not a bit. You know, Julia enjoyed the trappings of celebrityhood, but she really thought of herself as a teacher and as a student, and was in a lifelong pursuit of knowledge and experience. And so the celebrity thing was fun for her because she was a bit of a ham, and she enjoyed being on television and having fun with it. But really, her message was quite serious, which is that we ought to enjoy our food, we ought to take time and care and prepare it correctly, and we ought to have fun doing it and make it a communal event.
So you're saying she thought of herself first and foremost as a teacher, not as a cook or chef, not as a television personality?
Well, a teacher of cookery, as you put it, yes. And as a student, you know, she just loved to learn. And so I think the celebrity thing was a nice side benefit for her. We were
talking earlier before this started that she was not a highfalutin eater herself. Well, I mean, she was an eater, but she would eat the crackers and anything.
Well, one of her favorite hors d'oeuvres was the little orange goldfish.
Right.
Yeah, no, and she liked a good hamburger and a good French fry, but she also knew her sauces and loved very elaborate French meals and fine wine. So she was very democratic in her tastes, yeah.
How do you see her influence today?
Oh, you see it everywhere, of course. She wasn't the first chef on television, but she was the one who really brought, I think, cooking on television to a large audience. And you look at what has happened now, and it's just exploded. It's amazing. But aside from that, there's a seriousness about food in this country that I think she helped to inspire and to spur onward. And there is a real interest in cookbooks as a genre. And her influence extends in many ways. One of the things that I always like to point out is that she had a sort of a life philosophy that she applied to cooking, but that one can apply to any aspect of life. It was a very optimistic view of the world. very positive. She would always say, you know, work hard, take risks. If you make a mistake, don't apologize, and above all, have fun. And you know, she would sum it up by saying, "Bon appetit." And I think that that was something that is part of her legacy. That's this very optimistic, can-do, risk-taking, fun-loving approach to life.
And no doubt why we're still here talking about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Alex Prudhomme, thanks so much.
Merci.